The Riyadh season event may not have been the greatest card in history, but hopefully this trend of mega cards continues. This card could have been called the things we can see coming, as most of the outcomes were predictable, and in my view, there weren't any surprises aside from one breakout performance. Starting with the Jared Anderson versus Martin Bakole fight, it was evident to anyone following Anderson's career that this was coming. From his emotional admission to Roy Jones Jr. about struggling with pressure to leading police on a 6-mile, 130-mile-per-hour chase, Anderson appeared to be on a fast track to self-destruction. I was optimistic about his chances until the bout with Prince Charles Martin and that tearful episode before the pep talk with Roy Jones Jr. It became clear that he wasn't the next American star. He has talent, but his heart doesn't seem to be in the sport. Consequently, the search for the next American heavyweight contender is back to square one. Anderson was considered the top American prospect by default, as there isn't anyone aside from maybe Richard Torres and possibly a dark horse in Sonny Conto that could enter into that conversation. Now, that being said, Anderson was in tough against Bakole, who looked like a monster in there. Thoroughly intimidating Anderson from the get-go. He threw every punch with bad intentions. He almost looked like a heavyweight John Mugabe in some sequences. And he seemed bigger than his listed 6'6" if Anderson is at 6'4". So I'm looking forward to seeing more from Bakole, as he looks like he can bring some excitement into the heavyweight division. Next up was the Andy Ruiz-Jerell Miller bout. This was the fight I was least interested in, and it lived up to my expectations. Both of these fighters are afterthoughts now. Ruiz is 34 and hadn't fought in close to 2 years. He injured his hand in this one, so now we're looking at another layoff for him. But he looked fatigued after the 5th round here. Meanwhile, Miller was coming off his first loss, in which he was grossly out of shape against Daniel Dubois, getting stopped over 10. Here he came in at 28 pounds lighter. I thought Miller won this fight, but he had a fatigued fighter in front of him and couldn't finish the job. Miller just doesn't have that explosiveness or speed that would make him a fighter that people want to see. He just mauls and walks down his opponents. The bout was unjustly scored, but again, I think this was a fight between two afterthoughts of the division who had their chances in the past and squandered them. The co-main event was Esau Cruz against Jose Valenzuela. I was never that high on Esau Cruz. He is aggressive and fun to watch when he gets going, but I watched his fights and could see the writing on the wall. He was too one-dimensional and was going to get outboxed by the first technician he faced who had a good chin. One of the axioms in boxing that is rarely talked about is how short and squat fighters, rarely stay at the top for very long. As an example, if you look at fighters in the past like Juan Baby Bull Diaz or Frankie Warren, typically short fighters have a shorter shelf life than their taller counterparts. Fighters with that spark plug build tend to burn out after a couple of years as they take too many punches to give one. And in Cruz's case, he's simply too one-dimensional. He does cut off the ring, but he doesn't jab his way in, and he doesn't have the punch volume of, say, a Baby Bull Diaz from a few years ago. I think his stock takes a big hit in this loss as he looked just so ineffective. Meanwhile, Valenzuela surprised me with his ring generalship. He's a solid puncher that upped his technical game in working with Robert Garcia, and he clearly deserved this decision. In the main event, the highlight was seeing Kate Beckinsale at ringside, which says everything about how interesting the Terence Crawford-Israel Madrimov fight was. She deserves an Oscar for looking interested in this match that was quite frankly a bore fest. I got annoyed at the DAZN announcers making excuses for the two fighters, stating that they are feeling each other out and that the booing fans didn't understand the strategies that were taking place in the ring. Well, boring is boring. Fans came to see punches thrown, and I'll lay the majority of the blame on Madrimov. I had the fight a runaway for Crawford, 116-112, with one swing round I gave to Madrimov, so I could have had it 117-111 for Crawford. I thought he out-jabbed Madrimov and outmaneuvered him in a fight where there were limited exchanges. I see a lot of criticism for Crawford online, but I feel it's unjust because Madrimov is a really hard fighter to look good against. He has this herky-jerky rhythm, goes in and out. He was faking as if he was going to attack, but did very little else, particularly in the early rounds. I thought Sean Porter was the only announcer who had it right when he said that Crawford was winning the majority of the rounds. I also thought it was silly to suggest that the challenger, Crawford, had to take the title away from the champion, Madrimov, meaning that in a close fight, judges are often inclined to favor the reigning champion when scoring the bout. That sentiment really only applies to long-standing champions. Like, back in the day, Ali and Holmes received the benefit of the doubt on a few occasions. Madrimov has had 11 pro fights and won a vacant title 5 months ago. So I thought that conversation was a silly one. Crawford was the A side here, and it was up to Madrimov to be the aggressor and leave no doubt in the judges' minds. He didn't do it. He did a lot of bouncing up and down in front of Crawford, changing angles, causing Crawford to reset. It was rinse and repeat for the whole fight, with neither fighter really landing anything significant. But I thought Crawford did more. Now it's being said that Crawford's possible fight with Canelo Alvarez is off the table because of the closeness of this fight. But I disagree. I think a fight with Canelo is doable and competitive. Canelo is not a big super middleweight. He's a half-inch shorter than Crawford. So Crawford is not going up against a huge guy like David Benavidez. Canelo is short and uses finesse. He doesn't use his physicality to bully opponents, although obviously he'd be more acclimated to the higher weight than Crawford. But because of their respective ages, Crawford is 37 next month and Canelo is 34. These guys are old, so I don't see this as being a major super fight. I think it's a competitive fight and an interesting one, but I don't see a whole lot of clamor for it. I'd rather see Canelo against Benavidez, which apparently isn't happening, and Crawford against Jaron Ennis. So that's my take on the weekend's bouts. Let me know what you think, and I think I'll have some documentary pieces dropping soon. Thanks for listening.